And we're live, and we're asking, who do you vote for? Because coming up pretty soon in the UK, it will be the general election. The most exciting night of the year, isn't it? Staying up late to watch the swingometer as it shows you which party's in the lead and who needs what vote and all the constituencies where it's all hanging in the balance. I personally can't wait. And friend of the channel, George Galloway, is running as an independent in West Brom, and he is attempting to oust Tom Watson, the deputy Labour leader. So he's got his work cut out there. And his ticket, I suppose, is one for the Brexiteers, and in his view, Tom Watson has betrayed the people, particularly in a constituency like that, who voted Leave by and large. But it is difficult running as an independent. Not many independents do get elected to Parliament, but every year it's interesting to watch the people that have obviously done it for a laugh or done it to make a political point. It's interesting today that Nigel Farage has decided not to run for election. He will not be standing for Member of Parliament. And it would have been interesting had he stood in Uxbridge for the Brexit Party, as that would have put him up against Boris Johnson. And I remember last time round in Theresa May's constituency of Maidenhead, Lord Buckethead was standing for election, and he's another one of these eccentric characters who raises the funds to stand for election. I think it's something like £5,000 you need to put up front as a deposit if you wish to run for election, just to show that you're serious about it. Do we really have democracy if you have to pay to stand for election? I don't know what that says for the man on the street who might want to get himself elected, or woman. But you had Lord Buckethead, and obviously when the count comes in, they have their moment in front of the television. And there was a great picture the next day, and there was Theresa May, and there was Lord Buckethead, and the Lib Dems, and the Labour candidate, whoever they might be, and someone had captioned it, "Who's that woman standing next to Lord Buckethead?" Yeah, exactly. Theresa May. Theresa who? She is almost completely forgotten. We live in strange times where people are forgotten very quickly. But yes, she was the second female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She reminded me a lot of that other Prime Minister. Who was it? John Major. Yeah. But standing as an independent is great as a protest vote. And I've often thought about standing against Michael Gove. He's the Tory Member of Parliament for Surrey Heath, a Conservative safe seat. All the top politicians will always be contesting a safe seat. You know, they like to guarantee their job. But if I were to run against Michael Gove, I thought I could change my name to Michael Grove, and I might at least get a few dyslexic votes, and it might be a good protest. But people who have been elected as independents in the past, or from newly created political parties and parties that have split off from other parties, it has happened. In 2005, George Galloway was elected as MP for Bethnal Green and Bow in East London, and that was back when he was leader of the Respect Party. And the party seems to have disbanded and split off into different factions now, unfortunately. So he is standing as an independent, and there is no more Respect Party. But it will be very exciting to see what he can do. He was last time he was MP, I think it was for, I want to say, Bradford, Blackburn, Bradford, MP for Bradford. This was a few years back, and he defeated I think it was the Labour candidate in that election. Was it a chap called Imran Hussain? I think it might have been. And then, unfortunately, he was defeated by Naz Shah, the Labour candidate in that constituency. Yet again, it's a Labour safe seat. And funny enough, Naz Shah had requested to stand for election in that constituency for Respect. So in a way, she betrayed George Galloway and stabbed him in the back. But hey, that's politics. It's a dirty game. But going back a few decades prior to that, another standout upset election happened when Bobby Sands, the hunger striker who we mentioned last night on the live stream, who was an IRA prisoner and was on hunger strike protesting the conditions of the prisoners in the H block cells in the the Maze prison, the Crumlin Road prison, the H block cells. And he had an opportunity when the MP for Fermanagh and South Tyrone died and a by-election was called. The opportunity was there to stand for election, and in a very hard-fought campaign and closely run contest, I remember watching a video of the results coming in, and the Loyalist candidate receives 29,000 votes, and then you're waiting for the Bobby Sands result to come in, and you only have to hear 30,000 being mentioned, and you know that he's won and he's been elected to Parliament. And at the time, a lot of people thought this would save his life and that this was something bigger than politics. And the slogan at the time was "Lend us your vote and don't let them die." And Bobby Sands, being the first hunger striker to take on the fast, and the tactic that time round was to begin the hunger strikes a week separating each individual who went on the strike. So at that point, no one had died, and Bobby Sands had said that he was well aware that going first he could well die, and he thought he probably would die, but he hoped that he would be the only one. And tragically, after he did pass away as an elected member of Parliament, 9 other hunger strikers followed him and fasted to the death. So this is a very emotive story, obviously, and it's historic. And it was a moment when standing as an MP was used as a protest. And Margaret Thatcher, who didn't negotiate with terrorists, as she called it, who said that crime is crime is crime, and thought that Belfast was as British as Finchley. Her government actually had the law changed after that, so that a person serving a prison sentence could not stand for election in the United Kingdom. Is that fair? I don't know. It's moving the goalposts, but whenever you find a way that your enemies or your opposition could defeat you, you seem to find a way of changing the game. So from that day on, prisoners could not stand for election. And, do you know, I'm not sure offhand whether prisoners can vote. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments. If you are in prison in the United Kingdom, do you have the right to vote in general elections? Not sure. Some people don't like us to vote at all. Some Muslims think that taking part in democracy is somehow against their religion. And I've even heard people were referring to taking part in democratic elections as shirk, as in associating partners with God, as in the worst sin that you can commit in Islam. And I suppose the logic is that if God is meant to be the ruler or have dominion over the world or all the worlds, then to give that authority to another entity is somehow disrespectful to God. But I do think it's a dangerous game, not voting. And I'm in two minds on this one, because as much as I am of the opinion that the system is broken and the system is rigged and the elite are in control, and by partaking in the system that they have set up, you are kind of condoning it. But what happens if you don't take part? What happens if there is high voter apathy and hardly anyone votes or no one votes? Well, I'll tell you who does vote a lot. I'll tell you who always votes. And that's extremists. People with an extreme ideology, unless they're extreme Muslims who don't believe in voting, people with an extreme ideology will always turn out to vote. And for example, Adolf Hitler, who was democratically elected, won the election when there was a very low turnout and lots of voter apathy. So you will give more power to the extremists if you don't get out there and vote. And maybe you should just get down to the voting booth and destroy your ballot. Maybe you should say none of the above, or I don't agree with any of them. But then again, is that endorsing a system that's broken? It's a difficult question, but I will be voting on the 12th of December, I will be voting Labour. There's no need to be neutral on a YouTube channel, but it is interesting in the build up to the election, once you get into that period when every TV channel by law has to be neutral. And the minute that people mention one particular candidate, they then have to mention all the other candidates and say other candidates are available, and for a complete list of the candidates in your area, go to such and such a website, and they have to jump through all this red tape so as not to be deemed as biased. But media is always biased, and it's interesting that TV channels have to be deemed neutral. However, I don't think the same is true of newspapers, because newspapers will regularly come out in favour of a particular party, or they will back and so. And I think in 1997, crucially, The Sun backed Labour, and they were open about it, having been more of a Tory-leaning newspaper prior to that. But it's a little bit of a question of chicken and the egg. Did Labour win because the Sun newspaper gave them their support? Or did the Sun, being clever and having their nose to the ground, sensed that Labour were going to win the election and thought, well, it would be a clever move to be deemed to be on the winning team? You never know. But and I was too young to vote in 1997, but being from a Labour family, I was very pleased that Labour won the election and Tony Blair became the Prime Minister. But little did I know that that wasn't really a Labour government. That wasn't really the Labour Party. That was New Labour that became, following the Iraq War, just another neocon party in reality. And Tony Blair did a lot of good things. I think prior to that, he did help the peace process in the north of Ireland, and we remember his cliche now when he said, I felt the hand of history today. Tony Blair. I can apologise for the war in Iraq, but I can't apologise for getting rid of Saddam Hussein. That's my attempt at Tony Blair there. I haven't really perfected it, but there's a man that I looked up to when you're young and you are just beginning to understand what politics is and which side you're on and which way you would vote if you could. And then he goes and does something like the Iraq War. So, what can I say? It's heartbreaking, but that is the price of interventionism. And Britain followed America over the cliff far too many times. And it kind of illustrates the fact that it doesn't matter whether your leader is so-called on the left or so-called on the right, if they are an interventionist who is engaging in these foreign wars for the benefit of a different agenda. And we had Tony Blair, who's supposedly Labour, supposedly of the left, cozying up to George W. Bush, who is a Republican and of the right, but the bottom line is they're both interventionist, and they came up with this coalition of the willing, and it was a coalition of the willing to do killing in the Middle East. And when George W. Bush finished and we had Barack Obama, the fallen messiah, as some viewers of this channel call him, who was this new, different black president for the first time. Yeah, we were all very excited about it. I remember staying up to watch the election and the Reverend Jesse Jackson crying tears of joy as Barack Obama became the first black president of the United States. And there you have a left-leaning president, and over in the UK, shortly after Obama took office in America, Tony Blair retired, hung up the gloves after only 10 years or so. That's not a dictator, though. And we had a brief stint from Gordon Brown, but then it went to the Tories, and you had David Cameron. So for a brief overlap, you've got Barack Obama in America, David Cameron in the United Kingdom. So we've gone from having the left wing in the UK and the right wing in America to the so-called left wing in America and the right wing in the UK. But they're still doing the same thing. They're still invading Middle Eastern countries and bombing the hell out of people. So what does it really matter? Is it all just a big con? And have I been conned because I will be putting my ex in a box next to a Labour candidate in a few weeks' time? It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. And it is not something I can decide one way or the other. But it's good to be in two minds about things. We shouldn't be so sure all the time. We're living in times when people generally, whether they're right or wrong, are very sure. So my advice is always question yourself and always try to think outside the box and think about things from the other perspective. But yeah, I do have, well, they're not fond memories, but at the time I was hopeful when Barack Obama was standing for election, and then the whole election night, and then John McCain, who is still dead, I remind you. John McCain lost out to Barack Obama, and he gave such a gracious acceptance speech when it became clear that Barack Obama had won, and Barack Obama had only recently lost his grandmother prior to the election, and John McCain sort of paid tribute to that fact, and it was a nice little happy moment. And over the years, Obama was always this very well presented, respectable face of politics who knew exactly what to say, who knew exactly how to say it, and was very diplomatic whilst he was killing people. They recently showed the contrasting clips and the difference between how Donald Trump, who is very rough around the edges, clumsy, abrupt, says what he thinks without really thinking about it, how he reacted to the killing of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the Big Daddy, versus when Barack Obama assassinated, or his team assassinated, bin Laden. And of course, Barack Obama was very modest, humble, and sensitive about the whole thing. Donald Trump gave it the old, he died like a dog, and was a beautiful moment. I think he said it was a beautiful dog or something. He made this strange comparison to the animal kingdom. But what does it matter whether you present yourself in a respectable light or a disrespectful light if you are fighting for the same team? And I've got no sympathy for either bin Laden or ISIS, but bin Laden and ISIS are both entities that have been at one time supported and encouraged and helped to cause havoc in one place or another, so that they could later be used as a casus bellum for an intervention in the Middle East. And it happened much more quickly than I thought it would. When I remember back to the early days of the so-called Arab Spring in Syria, and the armed uprising was going quite well and was being supported, and the rebels were being portrayed as, well, as rebels, as moderate rebels often. And I thought, I can see what will happen here. Bashar al-Assad will be toppled. A lunatic Salafist fundamentalist regime will be installed in Syria. And in about 5 years' time, the United States will come and say, well, we need to invade Syria now. Let's see who this is. Hello, caller. You're live.
Yes, big up the family.
Thank you. Who's this?
This is Annabelle Ross.
Welcome. You're welcome on Lessons for Life.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. If you turn your phone down so you're not hearing the live broadcast, we'll hear you fine.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
No problem. No problem.
Yes, done.
Yeah, you're welcome. So originally I was talking about who do you vote for, but what's your take on that?
Say that again. Can you ask me the question?
Yeah, who do you vote for when it's a general election? Do you vote?
No, I don't vote at all. I don't believe in voting that's gonna make real change for the people.
Okay, why not? Why would voting not make a difference?
I feel like the system is all rigged.
Interesting. I was saying that also, but if we don't vote, extremists always vote, and we'll end up with an extremist getting into power if we don't vote for someone more moderate.
I hear you, but I feel like whoever we vote for has already been put in place by the people in power, because all these people come from very wealthy backgrounds, and they've been to special schools as well.
That's true. Most of them are privately educated. The Eton lot.
Exactly. So they've all come from a certain background. They've got a certain way of thinking, and all their friends, they're kind of well-off people. They're not like people like me and you. But so I feel like they've got their own agenda and they've got their own plans, you know?
So the majority of people are not like that. They're like you and me. So why...
What I've been saying to a long time is most of these politicians, they've got a completely different life to me and you.
So why do we keep falling for it?
Sorry?
Why do we keep falling for it then?
Because people are ignorant, you know? I feel like people are not educated. This is why the level of education, I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last 20, 30 years, it's been decreasing in quality.
Well, we might have to start educating ourselves then. I mean, we've all got the internet. The information is all there freely at the touch of a button, but people are not choosing to educate themselves then.
Exactly. This is why I kind of love the internet, because it's giving us a way where we can get information at the tip of our fingers.
But well, it is being censored as well. People that do not toe the line will be taken down.
Exactly. No, it's being censored all the time, but I feel like we should make use of it while it's there, while it's freely available to us. We should make use of it.
So, on the 12th of December, when the country goes to the polls, you will not be voting, no? Not interested at all?
No, not interested at all. I've never voted in my life. And I feel like, because there's always this argument of where they say, but if you don't vote, then you've got no say. This is what people always say to me.
So what if, I don't know where you live and you don't need to give it away, but what if locally where you were, there was, let's say, a BNP candidate, a hardline racist that wanted to deport ethnic minorities, and he was doing quite well, would you turn out to vote to make sure he didn't get a seat in your local constituency?
No, I wouldn't even bother.
You still wouldn't, but that wouldn't bring you out to vote?
No, because I'm going to be honest with you. The people that are in power right now, they are racist.
Okay.
You know? They are racist. And we have an institution which is the state of Britain, which is institutionally racist.
And where's your evidence for that? How does that manifest itself?
Well, because, history testifies to that. I've researched history heavily. It's one of my favorite subjects. And, look at what they've done in Africa. Look at what they've done in India.
But do you think Boris Johnson is a racist himself?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. He won't say it out loud. That's the thing. But I'm sure 100%.
He did. Well, he made some strange comments out loud about Africans. I think he did. He's dropped the ball a couple of times. But
exactly. They once in a while they'll drop the ball. They'll give you a slight hint of the way they're thinking, but they'll never say it out loud. And
he made comments about the burqa also. Rather unfortunately.
Yeah, I've heard them comments, and that kind of shows me already his mindset. And you got to remember, he comes from Eton. You know Eton?
Yes, he was born in America. He's actually an immigrant to this country.
There you go. And he was part of a club which is called the Burlington Club.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Which what they used to do is they used to mock the poor people, and they used to get £50 notes and burn it in front of homeless people.
Wow. That's
what I'm trying to show you. Their mindset is a total disregard, total disrespect, and they do not value the working people. He's
also partly Turkish, is Boris Johnson. I don't know if you know that.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Either his grandfather or possibly great-grandfather left Turkey. I think he was a traitor to Turkey. I'm not sure exactly what went on there. But he's obviously, I think being the Prime Minister was just an ambition for him, and he's quite power hungry, and he's lived up to his ambition. It's what he wanted to do, and he's managed to do it for him, kind of in a selfish way. I don't sense he wants to serve the people. It's more about him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, even in this latest thing that he's done, the whole pact which he's done with the EU, it's basically, it's not going to get us out of Europe.
Yeah, interesting.
I've had a look of Nigel Farage's opinion. I mean, because he seems quite a sensible guy in the fact that he wants to come out of Europe, and he said that the deal is pretty much very similar to Theresa May's deal. So I agree with the UK coming out of Europe. However, I do not think it's going to happen, because I feel like the people who are in power don't want us to come out of Europe.
Well, this makes your point very clearly. I think if the people voted to leave the European Union, that happened. If the EU let it happen easily, I think other countries would do it straight away. So they have to make it as hard as they can.
I've had the argument, the same argument I've been using that to say this is another reason why they will not let us come out of Europe, because, as you said, if we come out of Europe, it's going to encourage other countries to come out.
Yeah.
And they don't want that.
Yeah, and several other countries have had votes against being in the EU, and then they just have another vote. Happened in Ireland with the Lisbon Treaty.
Exactly.
So it is a good point you make. What's your name, my friend?
Hannibal Ross Trill.
Hannibal Ross Chill, yeah?
Trill.
Okay. Thank you very much for getting in touch. Glad to have you watching and listening. I hope you'll do it again.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to ask, are you voting then at all?
I will be voting Labour, as I always do. I know I've kind of agreed with a lot of what you've said, but my values are the Labour values in many ways, so I will be voting for Labour, but I don't think they have a much chance of winning this time round, unfortunately.
No, they're going to have a very, very small chance, I think, of winning, and I feel like Corbyn, he talks a lot of good stuff, but I feel like he's just part of the establishment, and once he gets into power, it'll be a different story.
Yeah, and he's already compromised on a lot of his old principles, and that's why he's the leader. If he'd stuck to all his principles, he wouldn't be the leader, and that's kind of the catch-22. But Hannibal, thank you very much for getting in touch, my friend. I hope we'll do it again.
Definitely, I'm keeping an eye out for your shows.
Superb, yeah. Thank you very much.
They're really good. I like how you approach, because you seem to be quite, you're not biased, you're quite impartial.
That's what we're trying to be. I mean, when I am biased, I admit it, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, that's good. At least admit it, and I enjoy your show, so I'll keep an eye out, and I hope to be able to come on again.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Thank you very much. Save the number.
I'll be in the comments.
Yeah. Brilliant, yeah. Superb.
And,
Thank you, Hannibal. Superb. Thank you very much.
And are you coming Speaker's Corner? Because I was down at Speaker's Corner today. I didn't see you down there.
How is Speaker's Corner?
It was really good. It was really lively. We had some really interesting conversations, you know. It was really good today. I enjoyed it.
I'm glad it's still going. All I can say is I'll be back there one day.
Good, man. We look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, my bro. You take care.
All right, take care, mate.
I'll see you. Take care. That's a nice call. There goes Hannibal. It must be a fellow insomniac. Yeah, he makes a lot of good points about the fact that does it really make a difference? Someone quoted Mark Twain the other night saying if voting made a difference, it would be illegal. But some politicians do like to make a difference in other people's elections. We heard a lot about possible Russian interference with the election that got Trump elected, and a lot of that came from accusations from Hillary Clinton. But what a hypocrite, because Hillary Clinton is on record, and I mean on audio recording, espousing the idea of fixing the election in the Palestinian territories. And there is a recording of her. There's Hannibal saying, big up, lessons for life. Thank you very much. That was, Hannibal Ras Trill. I wonder if that's Ras as in Rasta, or Ras as in the head. I'm not Rastafari, the head of the one to be feared. But yeah, Hillary Clinton was on record suggesting rig the election in Palestine, and the election in Palestine didn't go their way. When the Palestinians voted for Hamas, the world turned their back on them. The only democratically elected government anywhere in the Arab world at the time, and because it wasn't the right democratically elected government. The world turned their back on them, and Palestine got further partitioned than it ever had been before, and Hamas took control of Gaza. Fatah took control of the West Bank, and it was just another case of divide and conquer. So Britain and America love to get involved in other people's business and other people's elections. Around the same time when Ahmadinejad in Iran was standing for election, the whole world tried to get behind the Green movement and oust Mahmoud Ahmadinejad because he's not a Western puppet. I don't think he was a great man. I don't agree with his political party on many things, but if you are the democratically elected president of Iran, then that's who you are, and no one in the West has any right to interfere and say, I don't like the way the elections were run in Iran, even though journalists from America did head there and oversaw the election. And I think it was ABC News that said this was a free and fair election, although you may not like the outcome. And Iran has a long history of coups and attempted coups and foreign intervention. And although it's not a perfect democracy, there is much more democracy in the Islamic Republic of Iran than there is in the Saudi kingdom just next door. So how can we criticize the lack of democracy in a country that has open democratic elections while supporting a dictatorship next door that has no elections whatsoever, that has one family rule and regularly executes political dissidents? And we even mentioned one of them yesterday, who was a Shia cleric who was executed, beheaded. I mean, whether you're being executed in Iran or executed in Saudi Arabia, to me, that's a backwards practice. But we tend to overlook it, or the political class tend to overlook it when it's in one country and emphasize it when it's in another. But like I said, politics, it's a dirty game, and we get involved. And I'll be staying up all night on election night, 12th of December. It'll be quite exciting, actually. Maybe I'll try and find somewhere interesting to live stream from, and we can do a marathon, stay up all night and watch the swingometer, because I do always like to even for whether it's the American election or the UK election, there is a sense of this is something important happening, even though, as Annabelle pointed out, probably it's all rigged, it's all fixed. The elite will win no matter what, and they're laughing at us taking part in these little games election night. But yeah, stay tuned for that, and we'll try and sort that out, a live stream on election night. And I'm hoping to follow some of the hustings and the campaigning in West Brom for George Galloway's shot at ousting Tom Watson, which I have to wish him good luck with. Anyway, thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching it on a repeat. This has been Lessons for Life. We'll do it all again soon. We were here, and we're gone. Laters.